welcome back to the Promoted Podcast. I'm your host, Felicity Fury, engineer, author, speaker, and I feel like I'm going to add in nerd because I've been nerding out about a lot of engineering stuff lately, and I've been so happy that my friends on LinkedIn also nerding out with me. Renee, it's so great to have you here. I'm on Gubby Gubby country. I'm joined by the incredible Renee Wooten. Can I say fellow nerd? I think I can. I'm going to call it Renee. Fellow nerd.
Yeah.
Commercial pilot, aerospace engineer, business founder as well. It's so great to have you here, Renee. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Larrakia country today. Thank you so much for that incredible announcement. And yeah, I mean, what's been happening? It's been a wild kind of start to the year. We've got a lot going on. But yes, definitely a fellow nerd. And by the way, I have been watching, reading, liking, loving, commenting on all of your nerdy posts. And I'm so enjoying them. So like, honestly, the build up to this book is just like so exciting and I'm here for it. So please keep bringing me content.
Thank you. I've done a lot of research for my new book that's coming out called The Future of Engineering, Legacy by Design. And there's so many case studies in there. I think there's like something like 40 different case studies throughout the book. And I was like, I'm going to just share some of this stuff and see if other people enjoy it. And I think a lot of the posts on LinkedIn, I go for like the leadership stuff or more of the people thing. And I kind of shy away sometimes from this engineering nerd. I just got new glasses and I've got two options. And one is like, they're like the round, like I'm like nerding it up. I'm going to go like the round nerd glasses. I'm just going to embrace it.
To see this.
Get ready, Renee. Maybe we'll have them on a podcast coming soon. They're coming in 2 weeks. Yeah. So yeah, I've been really loving the comments as well on the LinkedIn post, people sharing projects they've worked on and also some really interesting questions. So shout out to Dale who had this comment on my post. While I've been traveling over Christmas, it's been a great opportunity to also notice different pieces of infrastructure. Something simple like a park bench I found really helpful and noticing what infrastructure is in places and what isn't. And one city that I went to in Tasmania actually had these street signs and I felt like they were alarming. Like they were fluorescent yellow with blue. And I was like, this is so intense. It's like it's screaming at me. I think particularly maybe I was in the holiday mode. Maybe it was because I had my 2 kids and I was trying to find a birthday present for my husband. There was a lot going on. And it just got me thinking about how, and this is a lot of the stuff that's in my book is around how do we design infrastructure to care for people and have people feel really like safe and calm or feel in a space that they are a part of that space and they're taken care of. And care was a really big thing that came out in the book. And so Dale was asking me, how do you prioritize, like what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize the standard, the thing that's actually in the standard, or do you interpret that and apply it with more human judgment? And I know like I'm talking usually about the built environment and I know your context is different, Renee, but I'm really keen to hear your thoughts. And I did actually talk about this in the book around like the just culture in aviation and a lot of these great lessons that I think we can learn from aviation. Obviously, safety is a huge part in both infrastructure and aviation, and that's why we do have a lot of standards. But I think there's another level we can go. And again, I talk about this in the book that I think that it's not that engineering is wrong. I just feel like it's incomplete and there's more that we can do. And I think I'm not out to be like, let's rewrite the standards, but I think we have this real opportunity as engineers, as professionals to add our judgment to care better for people in the things that we're building and creating. So Renee, what has been your experience? I feel like you're not a stick to the standards kind of gal. You think deeply about people and you're one of the most caring people I know. Has this come up for you, maybe even in your leadership experience too? Because I'm sure there are lots of policies that didn't have those things in it, and that's still design, right? You're designing a policy. What's been your experience of that standard versus the judgment as an engineer?
Such a good question. And I love that we are having this conversation because this is exactly why I'm building my own company. And I don't think it's a standards versus safety or standards versus human judgment kind of question. I think it's much bigger than that. I think that For a bit of context, I'm building New Era Energy, which is a pre-development, like an early venture that is looking at systematically building major infrastructure in Australia, like sustainable aviation fuels, and understanding that we need to think about standards, so the infrastructure and the engineering, and making sure that things are built to last long term. They're reliable, they're safe, but I'm also building a company that looks at the environment and making sure that we're protecting biodiversity, country, water, and land use, and including First Nations people in the conversation. And the reason that these three things are crucial to me is because we need to leverage and work with people in regional, local communities. We need to make sure that there's jobs and opportunities that surround these major pieces of infrastructure. But when we build these major pieces of infrastructure, the people that are involved are not only crucial, it's the impact around the environment that it's actually operating in. That's incredibly important. So for me, this is more about a systems change. It's not just about understanding if it's one policy versus, people and their safety. It's a whole of ecosystem systematic change. And I think in the past, a lot of this for me is driven by commercial KPIs. So we're always thinking about the bottom dollar and making the most efficient business, and keeping people safe as a huge part of commercial outcomes. Costs money to hurt people. So we want to reduce that impact, right? But then on top of that, there's these cultural safety values that businesses, make sure that they foster, which is to make sure that people do feel like they can come to work and go home safely. The next part of that is, okay, well, if we're designing these major pieces of infrastructure, how are they helping the local community, people and country and animals, biodiversity? So I think it's much bigger, Felicity, than just people and regulations. And I think that this is a brand new concept. I don't think... And the reason I say that is because no business really can do this stuff well unless you are already a First Nations business that are operating commercially viably and having positive impacts on the environment. And those businesses, I know a couple. Tidal Moon is an incredible example over in Western Australia. The Ranger programs, carbon offsetting programs with First Nations businesses are great examples, because using traditional, long, millennial length, knowledge of country and animals to build businesses that include people that are in those local regional communities, whilst also having a really safe operating business that provides commercial returns. So this is a huge conversation, to be quite frank, and one that's not simply answered. There's so many competing interests, and I think that we get so fixated on just delivering things at speed to market that sometimes those nice-to-haves, perceivably the nice-to-haves that I'm trying to make core business now, are lost. They're lost in the priorities and that speed to market. So for me, I think... we think in such short cycles, whether it's political cycles or financial years, that we forget about the longer term impacts of building something for people, right? We just want to deliver this thing and get our paycheck and move on. And that's typically how business has been done for the past 50 years. So I think, if anything, this call out through your book, Felicity, that you're making is incredibly well timed, because our generation can no longer continue to operate like that, knowing how challenging and complex the future is. And the fact that community and people are the reason we do all of these things. So we need to make sure that those elements are essential design elements now in major infrastructure and not just standards.
Yeah, totally agree. Yes. And it's really interesting you talk about those different elements, because that's exactly the conclusion I've come to as well. And the three lenses that I look through in the book are around the human well-being part, around how do humans feel in an environment and how do we take care of people? Is it people? And then the next piece is around a connection to country, actually, Indigenous learning, incorporating that in. And I actually learned around, I think it's I'm sure it's in Australia. It's kind of like a principle anyway, or a philosophy of Indigenous Australians, but not explicit. But in American Indians, they talk about 7 generations. How do you think 7 generations in the future? Yes. And that was, I mean, it just seems so obvious, right? Like it's crazy that that's just not a standard practice for us today. And I remember going to the Institute of Public Works Engineers Conference when I was giving the opening keynote. And right after my keynote, there was young people having 5 minutes on stage presenting. And this one young woman got up and she said, I'm inheriting everything you designed 50 years ago. And I need to, now it's coming to the end of its design life. And so my career isn't about doing these new projects. It's actually this important asset management. And I think often this is like how I was trained, particularly in civil engineering, was you build it and then you leave it and that's it. And the third piece is around legacy. So that longer term view and not doing it for the short term efficiency, which I feel like is almost like a habit that we've gotten into from the industrial era. And again, I talk about in the book, that's the inherited DNA of engineers. And I think we need to reshape that DNA. And at the end of the day, it comes back to values. Everything you were talking to, Renee, so powerfully was what are people valuing and what are the values that we've embedded in organizations. And it's a great opportunity for you starting a new business because you get to set those values and you get to set that agenda. And I'm really actually hopeful because there are some projects that have actually done this. And that's where a lot of the case studies in the book are about. There's lots of ones in there of where it hasn't worked as well. But I think we're really starting to see, and in Australia, there's some great examples like the work Daniel Lambert's doing with Legacy and in the Pilbara with water and designing that. It's like designing it from the very beginning of what's the system that we're operating in and around partnering with Indigenous landowners, like genuinely from the start, not just like a tick box, is so incredible to see. So I've written down Tidal Moon because I didn't come across that one. So maybe version 2 of the book, Renee, like it'll make it in. But it's so great. There's so many examples that we can draw on where it works. And it's so crazy. Like I even did numbers on it in the book of like, okay, this building was designed for 200 years. Once you get out of like the building of it, sure, there's that upfront cost, but the long-term cost is so much cheaper. And it, like, if you're looking at dollars of just the cost benefit ratio, like it's crazy once you start to extend that out. And that's not like my practice as an engineer. We were just thinking like build the project, get out. And then you stop thinking about it, but it's actually that maintenance and legacy that's incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of the issues that we're going to see in our industry of the next 10, 20, 50 years is going to be, okay, now we have to maintain all this stuff. Now the real cost happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, like this is a systematic change, but it's also design principles that need to change. And to do this from the ground up is the most important part of any new business. If you have the opportunity to, there's actually a set of principles that now bring nature and people into the balance sheet. It's called the Task Force for Nature Financial Disclosures, the TNFD. And that particular framework is a framework that now incorporates and forces a business to put the environment and people on the balance sheet. And so it's such an exciting and like crucial advancement. And to me, it's a no-brainer, right? Like we can't continue to just to extract. It's all about now regeneration. And that's the challenge of our generation is climate resilience, nature resilience, biodiversity resilience, planetary resilience. We can't continue to extract and just rake in cash. We need to look after each other and the environment. And like, you know, I'm kind of the first to kind of share that we, and you know this, Felicity, we need nature, we need community to feel connected. And we become sicker without those things. So how have we avoided for such a long time not including nature and people on our balance sheet? So we do it in ways today, but we do it in very olive branch side strategy, not core business ways. And so that's my mandate for the rest of my life, to be honest. And that's why I've decided to build New Era Energy, because we can't continue to operate the way we do. And I can't imagine anyone coming to the end of their career thinking about how do we pivot and build that now. There might be some incredible people out there that are willing to exert the energy to do that. But I think it's up to my generation, our generation, the next generation to really start building those systems. So to me, this is absolutely a systems change, a systems problem, and I'm excited to bring my thinking into the world. And that's why I public speak. That's why I do this podcast. This is my mission in life, to try and help the next generation of business think thoughtfully in the way that we do that for the long term. Yeah.
And so do you have any advice? Because obviously it's easier when you start your own business or write your own book, full control of what you say, which is the benefit of it.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice of people who are working in organizations, whether it's senior leaders or junior people? I feel like younger generations are great at putting their voice forward. And I was even having a conversation just this week around reverse mentoring, of getting younger people to reverse mentor more senior people around diversity and inclusion. I was like, yes, that's so good. That makes so much sense. They will actually tell you how to how to implement things. But have you got any advice for people who are working in organizations or projects that, how can they implement some of these things today? Or I feel like there's no quick fix. It's a super long-term thing, and it's a change. Like, you start to implement the change and then you continually integrate that and repeat that. But have you seen any really helpful things that people can implement within their own organizations in this space?
I have so many things that people can do. Let's start with the great, idea that you've already thrown out there, which is reverse mentoring. Young people need to be on your board. That is the first and greatest opportunity. The amount that you will learn, the passion, the naivety that we all carry being young people is exactly what you need to have sitting at tables where you're stuck in the same systems and operations and you're not shifting the needle on the change that you're trying to introduce. Bring in young people. The second part to this is bring in Indigenous people. Australia is the luckiest country in the world, and we're so caught up in racism and forgetting that we have this history and this incredible knowledge to draw on. So I really suggest that people introduce and bring in First Nations people onto their advisory board. Throughout my life, I grew up in the generation of the Career Trackers program, which for a lot of people that don't know about it, it's the Indigenous internship program that helps Indigenous tertiary students get private sector internships in Australia. I was the first intern at Qantas back in 2011, and I have now grown up over the past, 15 years now, with a generation of Black, proud, young Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, professionals that are changing the game in corporate Australia. So there are qualified, capable, deadly young Indigenous professionals that you can now draw on that are out there. You just have to be willing to be flexible, to bring them in a capacity where they're paid for their time and given how stretched they will be, because most of us in this generation that have grown up in corporate Australia are stretched phenomenally, because so many people want to tap into that knowledge and need to tap into that knowledge because of the cultural wisdom, the connection to country, the respect for community. There's just so many benefits to bringing in Indigenous wisdom into your business. Remember that Indigenous people lived here for millennia before Australia was colonised. We live sustainably. We farm sustainably. We engineered. We use science. There are stories, and I'm sure that there is an appreciation for that, in theory, but in practice, it's so much more powerful. So start with your board. You need leadership from the top down to appreciate the changes that you need to introduce, which means you need people with diverse thought to be able to drive that change. And I've seen it from all of the experience that I've had across multiple corporates is if the people at the top don't believe in the change, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't matter how hard you're spinning your legs down the bottom. It's not going to happen. From there, I would say that most businesses feel overwhelmed just running their business, right? So if you can make incremental small changes used, for example, the Task Force for Nature financial disclosures as a great starting point, thinking about how do you value biodiversity and what is the impact that you're having just by operating, and pick one thing a year that you can strategically change in your business to help you achieve your sustainability goals, your long-term planning. A great example is Victoria is looking to build out their tourism for the next 20 to 30 years, but it's such a challenging, space at the moment with bushfires and climate resilience and, infrastructure building. Like there's just, these systems are so complex. No business is without that complexity, whether you're a small business or a major corporation. So do yourselves a favor and pick frameworks that you can slowly build upon. You don't have to change the world tomorrow. You just have to pick one problem at a time.
Yeah, so good. And I think you reminded me when you were speaking around, there's just the knowledge that I feel like we've lost is such a shame that in terms of Indigenous culture. And over the holidays, I started reading, I haven't finished it yet, the book, The Dreaming Path. And in there, they actually, just as an example, it's totally not related to engineering. I guess it is, because Indigenous people knew how, there's a plant that's actually a natural contraceptive, and the men would take it. I was like, how have we forgotten this male contraception, people? And so they'd take it in periods of time where food was scarce so that they didn't have heaps and heaps of kids and increase their population sizes. So they actually could even control their population sizes through plants and natural. And I was like, mind blown. So there's, for me, really,
where it's at.
There's so much stuff.
And The Dreaming Path is such a good book, by the way. If anybody wants to start anywhere, that's such a great book that I can recommend.
Yeah, I think, and that's really helped me as well, just really get connected and just learn more and educate myself on this topic. And I feel like there's so much more to learn and such a long way to go. I've only really started to scratch the surface. But yeah, that book has been really helpful just for me to get my head immersed into it. And I feel like I can relate to so many things on a values level. And there is actually things that practices I do in my life that are in the book too. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I'm already integrating some of these concepts without realizing it. And it's had it be less scary for me as a non-Indigenous person to go, oh, here's how I connect with this material and start to embed it and integrate it. And that's always been a barrier for me of, I don't want to get it wrong. And you've been so helpful, Renee, at me asking silly questions and opening up this world and feeling, I guess, more, I wouldn't say safe, but more confident in exploring it further. And so I think just getting knowledge, it sounds so basic, right? But it's such a, everyone can read a book, right? It's such a simple thing to do just to start that conversation and be empowered with that knowledge as well.
And can I just say that the philosophy for a lot of Indigenous Australians is that we want to sit down and have a yarn with people. We want to share our knowledge and our philosophies and our systems because we know they work. They kept us alive, for millennia. So, and I think we would prefer you to try than to be reserved and not try at all out of fear. Yeah. And like all people, you're never going to have, 100% positive engagements. That's we're all too diverse. We're all too different. We all come from different walks of life. But what I can say is, even just starting with your local Aboriginal Lands Council, they're literally there to support you and provide answers and connect you. So there are really clear governance structures in place if you want to make that first connection. Otherwise, just reading books and getting in touch with authors and asking questions, follow your curiosity and do exactly what you would do to run any project. It's speak to people, build your team, and just start one simple task. And I think that this is a welcomed invitation. If you're listening today, please reach out to myself. Please, ask any questions. Felicity, you're incredibly well connected, and your curiosity has led you to where you are today as well. So, I think everybody is incredibly overwhelmed. There are so many things out there that we all need to do to change the direction of the ship that we're in. And I think sometimes it's just as simple as listening and having a conversation to get you started.
Yeah, for sure. So good. This is not the direction I thought this conversation would go, but I've loved it even more Which I think that's what I really enjoy about jumping on these podcasts with you, Renee, is that we'll have a question and we actually don't pre-rehearse our answers. We get on and we have a chat about it. And I love it. My views get changed. I think, we know each other super well, but then I hear new things from you and I'm like, wow, I didn't think Renee would have that perspective. So I've loved where this conversation has taken us into, but I think that is really key, is that how do we embed, not just stick to standards, but actually embed some of that humanness is the perfect thing to talk about. Thanks so much for another awesome conversation, Renee. I can't wait for the next Promoted podcast episode. And it's so great to kick off the year having these conversations. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
Couldn't agree more. And thank you all for joining us today on the Promoted podcast, the podcast that gets you promoted to be great when you get there. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.